Hey y'all, welcome back to Kalashkamaz. So today we're going to be taking a look at a rifle you've seen on the channel, but we actually haven't talked about at all. Just used it in a couple matches and haven't actually mentioned it. And right now is a pretty good time to be talking about 223 AKs, what with everybody worried about 545 and whatnot.
How much is this, Marie?
It's very expensive.
It's very expensive.
Look, I got money to spend in here.
Today we're going to be looking at the Saiga. Now, Saigas are a whole family of rifles, and it is pronounced Saiga. It's named after the Saiga antelope. You hear some people say Saiga, but it is Saiga. They were originally introduced in the 70s in 5.6 by 39, which is also known as 220 Russian, which is a hunting caliber. However, the series was a fantastic commercial failure with only about 300 rifles being produced. The series would be reintroduced in the 90s in a variety of calibers, including 7.62 by 39, 5.45, 308, and 30-06, with a variety of shotguns, including a 12 gauge, a 410, and a 20 gauge. However, today we are talking about the 223 model, and these are produced at the Izhmash plant, which is short for the Izhevsk machine building plant, now known as Kalashnikov concern. This rifle could most closely be compared to the AK-100 series, sharing several features such as a hammer-forged chrome-lined barrel, a 90-degree gas block, and a third trunnion rivet. These do not come into the country, nor are they released in Russia in this configuration. They are actually released with a Monte Carlo style stock, otherwise known as a sporter stock. Basically, a hunting stock. These do have to be converted into this configuration. You can see this one is not quite finished and still has some holes there that need to be welded up and refinished. Now, the trigger guard features a tab right above the magazine release, and that is intended to stop the insertion of military magazines as well as accept their single stack magazines that include a feature intended for the lack of bullet guide. Now, that is another thing that needs to be added during the conversion, as these do not come from the factory with a bullet guide. And they were originally imported by the Russian American Armory, later on the Russian Weapons Company, and FIME. You would know FIME for Arsenal, and you would know Russian Weapons Company for their DBA, Kalashnikov USA. The configuration of my particular Saiga: just standard Russian wood stock, a Polish fatty grip, of course an ALG, and this handguard I get a little bit of questions about. This is an Armacon handguard. It's another Russian handguard, and an AK thumb grip. And I do have a Zenitko for this, just so that everything on here is Russian except for the grip, because you can't get a Russian fatty. And it is, the Zenitko is sitting in a bowl of solution right now to loosen up some Loctite, so it'll get on there eventually. So even though I always say I don't like tactical stuff, the reason I actually originally put this on here was to reduce the harmonic flex on the barrel when I'm going through ports. And this actually did serve the purpose very, very well. However, I originally put this on here for Kalashnikov and found that it's also going to be great for Kalashnikov because it's a match where you could use things like bipods and you can use things like lights, because there is some distance, and you know, every now and again they do have night matches. So aside from other night matches as well, you could also use that light, because other than that, you're gonna have to do what they do in Ukraine right now and just tape the light there. So, you know, not to say they don't have gear. I mean, you do see some Zenitko, you do see some Crook, so that's cool. So we do have our hammer face polish, and trigger pull is particularly light on this rifle. The recoil is present. It's not exactly a 5.45 rifle. You are talking about a higher pressure round than 5.45, so there's a little bit of muzzle climb. However, I think we are going to add in a K&S piston into this guy, so you know, we'll dial down that recoil a little bit into the 5.45 world and get this thing really rocking and rolling. However, as it is in stock form, took it to a Texas Tactical last weekend, and you know, I was actually there to try out another part for a review coming up, and that was the KUSA stock actually, so look forward to that. But took this rifle out to a Texas Tactical as well as a number of other events in the past few months, and it performs beautifully. It really performs beautifully. I am so used to 5.45 at this point that unfortunately even the 223 I had to get, used to and actually, do my seat clamping. So, that was a fun discovery. I'm like, oh yeah, man, I'm not even used to recoil like 223. That was pretty funny. So, mostly during Texas Tactical, it's scored like IDPA, so A zones are 0 shots, and your score, 2 on paper, you're scored outwards from there. So if your second shot is in the B zone, that's a 1. If it's in the C zone, that's a 2, so on and so forth. So the rifle actually performed pretty stably. I got 1 on damn near every target that day. Unfortunately, I did kind of shit the bed on one stage and got a couple 5s, so that didn't really help me too much. Rifle performed very stable during the match. I did not use iron sights. I used an RS Regulate with an SLX MD25, and I was able to get my headshots off in the targets that required headshots. I unfortunately did hit 1 no shoot in the day, kind of jacked my score up a little bit, and gave me I think a 5 on that one, and then I had another 5 on that stage, unfortunately. So those 2 little Mikey Mikes, they definitely hurt you, man. They can definitely hurt you, because other than that, the entire day I was pretty much getting 1s across the board, which basically means I needed to manage my recoil a little better and slow down just a little bit, because you could see by the footage, this is a match where you got to slow down significantly if you really want to get a good score, unless you have a very, very stable rifle, which I knew this has a little bit of muzzle climb. So I put that into account, slowed down a little bit, and, gauged my speed and throttled to the distance of the target, which at Texas Tactical is not too far. But, if it's a 20-yard shot, then that is still significantly different than a close-up port shot on a target. So, a close-up shot, you can just go did-it and move on. You're not going to have to worry about the muzzle climb too much if you just aim center mass and you get your 0. But, at distance, you do have to slow down and give it a dink-dink, make sure you get your 0. Unless you have an extremely stable rifle, which we are working this guy into. So the fit and finish of this conversion in its unfinished state is actually pretty good. It does still retain the tab down here, so I need to grind that down, but it still fits most magazines. I've heard a little contention that these are picky with magazines, and I don't think that's true at all. However, there is a difference if you have a dimpled receiver or a non-dimpled receiver. Apparently, you can put Galil mags in the non-dimpled receivers. However, some people think that if you have the dimple, you can't use Wasser 3 or Weiger magazines, which is absolutely not true. However, for best fitment, you're going to want to grind this tab down in the back here, which is going to happen, but I do have some very worn magazines, and, they fit in just fine. So, I actually haven't found many magazines that don't work in this other than Galil magazines. So, take that, sample size of 1. I can fit just damn near everything in this thing. Thank you for sticking around for this little rundown on the Saiga 223 and the Saiga family in general. You're definitely going to be seeing this rifle quite a bit more on the channel, as my only other 223 rifles are two 18 inches, a 10 inch, and a 13 inch, which is not yet pinned and welded. So, you know, we'll get to that. We'll get to those as they come, because, you know, I don't want to form a 13 inch rifle when it's possible that it has enough space on the threads to be able to time it to 16 inches. So that's what's happening. I just need a particular muzzle brake to do that. But it is what it is. If you're looking back on this video a year later, man, I sure do hope those rules are toast, but it still is what it is. So thank you guys again for joining me. Y'all stay safe, have fun, do stupid.